Now that we know that a majority of living things have the phospholipids as a component of their cell membrane, I say majority because we saw in archaeans that their cell membrane are made up of lipids that are not really phospholipids. We will now investigate or look more closely at the structure of these lipids. These are the majority of the components, structural components of the plasma membrane. So here we can see a space-filling model of the plasma membrane. And you can see how the phospholipids are oriented, okay? And in between the phospholipids, the ones in green, we actually have the cholesterol, which helps space apart or fill in the gaps between the phospholipids. We can see how the heads of the phospholipids are oriented so that they face either outside or inside of the cell towards the cytoplasm. And all of the hydrophobic tails are hidden away from water in between the bilayer. So we will use this symbol to actually note the position of the hydrophobic and the hydrophilic locations of a phospholipid or a lipid. Okay, so a majority of the lipids in the cell membrane are amphipathic, meaning to say they have a hydrophilic portion in their molecule, while there's also a hydrophobic portion in the molecule. So here's the first one, phosphoglyceride, also known as phospholipids. Okay, and then there are many types of phospholipids. They're known as phospholipids because in the head there is a phosphate group. So here's the simplest one. So here's the name, diolioyl phosphatidic acid. Okay, so this is a phosphoglyceride or a phospholipid. Here's another phospholipid, phosphatidic acid. Okay, so take note how the head portion of the phospholipid has some changes. And here we have phosphatidylcholine or lecithin. Okay, this is another phospholipid. And then here we have phosphatidylserine. Okay, another phospholipid. Then we have phosphatidylethanol-amine. And then we have phosphatidylinositol. And we also have this phospholipid, which has sort of a unique structure. This is diphosphatidylglycerol or cardiolipine. Then we also have phospholipid-like molecules, but we don't call them phospholipids because they don't contain the phosphate group in their head. So instead, they are actually known as the sphingolipids. So here we have the simplest one, sphingosine. Then here we have ceramide. And then here we have sphingomyelin. So notice in the names, okay, the names actually give out the location on where these lipids may be found. These are found in nervous tissues. Then we have cerebroside. Then we have ganglioside, still a sphingolipid. And here we have neither a phospholipid nor a sphingolipid, but still a lipid. This is a steroid known as cholesterol, which is also found in the cell membrane. And take note, there is a very small portion of the cholesterol molecule that's hydrophilic, the one with the hydroxyl group on the upper portion. So take note, there are many types of lipids that may be found in the cell membrane. And different cell membranes of different organisms may contain different proportions of these lipids. Okay? So we are just sort of looking at a list and the structure, an overview of the different lipids that may be found in the cell membrane. So in fact, here's an example. In the human erythrocyte, we can see, okay, that the most abundant type of lipid is phosphatidylcholine. Okay? And in the human erythrocyte or red blood cell, there is an absence of phosphatidylglycerol, for example. In a prokaryotic cell such as E. coli, there is an absence of phosphatidic acid and phosphatidylcholine and phosphatidylserine and sphingomyelin, glycolipids, and cholesterol from their cell membranes. But they have a lot of phosphatidylethanol-amine in their cell membranes. So different cells with different membranes have different proportions of the lipids that we just talked about. So phospholipids, just like triglycerides, or lipids, let's just say phospho and sphingolipids, may be polyunsaturated or saturated depending on their hydrocarbon tail, okay, or their hydrophobic tails. So if the hydrophobic tails are unsaturated, then there will be kinks among the tails, and if you put the lipids together, there will be gaps between them. The consequence is that the cell membrane that they comprise will be more fluid, as opposed to a cell membrane that only contains saturated phospholipids and sphingolipids, as shown here on the right, where the cell membrane becomes more or less flowy, okay, or more viscous, shall we say, less dynamic. Phospholipids are also not just randomly arranged on the cell membrane. There are certain associations or congregations of phospho and sphingolipids, and these congregations usually look like islands floating around or floating about on an ocean, as you see here. So we call these lipid rafts, okay? And the lipid rafts usually contain a lot of cholesterol, as we see here in yellow. And then there are also certain types of proteins that are associated with the lipid rafts. And then the surrounding ocean is actually the normal phospho and sphingolipids.